In a time where there's so many things that you can consume, I'm so grateful that you're here. And I'm grateful to my guest, Claudia Pineda. Claudia Pineda is a flight test engineer at Boeing and the founder of Cosmically Minded, a storytelling platform rooted in STEM, healing, travel, and empowerment. And I'm beyond honored to have her today. She was a part of Next Level Latina, and I'm so grateful to share her story. She was born from immigrant parents from El Salvador and Guatemala, and Claudia is a proud first generation college graduate whose journey is a testament to resilience, representation, and reclamation. I'm so excited for you to listen to today's episode, and we're going to talk about her professional path and how has taken form from design engineering work at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory and the high-speed innovation of SpaceX to the skies of Boeing, where she now works in the rigorous world of flight test engineering. And Claudia is such a well-rounded, multi-passionate, self-aware woman of service because these experiences that were once unimaginable from her upbringing in a low-income community now fuel her and fuel her commitment to help others expand their imagination of what's possible. Let us know what you think of this episode, and if you enjoy it, please rate the podcast 5 stars. Welcome to Empowermente, the headquarters of personal empowerment. Hello, Claudia, and welcome to the Empowermente podcast. I am so happy to have you and so grateful to have you here with me and grateful that you made the time. And I'm so excited to highlight your story, not only inside of Empowermente Next Level Latina Circle, but also your story as a whole, and I'll start by sharing that we've known each other online for a few years.
Yeah.
We connected a long time ago. We
I
connected,
know.
we connected in 2020, around 2020, 2021. And
Yeah.
I remember at the time I created a series on Instagram for like highlighting Hispanic voices. Look at me, 2021 me. And Hispanic Heritage Month, and I know, I featured you as part of that initiative, and we talked about self-discovery and self-love and healing, and it is so insane, how much we've progressed and grown throughout the years, and so I'm just happy to connect with you again in a different way, and so happy to have you.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. It's truly an honor. I think I'm a huge fan of the podcast as is. Like I've always listening to you in the different podcasts. So like it's actually insane or like it's just an honor to be a guest now.
Yeah, I'm so happy. So today's episode, I want again to talk a little bit about you, and I think the common themes are around owning your worth, taking up space, and embracing being multi-passionate. Because I
Mhm.
think those are our common themes in our lives right now, and so when we first started talking for being part of Next Level Latina, I remember that you mentioned that you had this great initiative, that you were part of a nonprofit, and that you had been doing public speaking for them. And you had this sense that you wanted to take your public speaking to the next level and you wanted to continue to build that career alongside building your engineering career as well. So I know that you wanted to keep building your engineering career at the same time as like being a public speaker. And I feel like we know so many people within our circle that do it, but really that's not a common theme. Like it's not a common
Yeah.
that people just do. Like, let me just continue and be a public speaker and a content creator and do all these things outside of work. But I remember that one of the things that you talked about is like, okay, I want to develop myself in this craft of public speaking and take it more seriously. And when you joined, you got this huge opportunity to like record a documentary style
Yeah.
video about you and your story and showcase it, and it was part of a fundraising activity for the nonprofit. They were going to use your story for it.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking like that is such a full circle moment, and I can see it from the outside. So I want to just ask you about that experience before we go into what happened after that. But that was kind of the point of when you joined the Next Level Latina Circle.
Yeah. So I remember, I think you had the first, like, I think the first season or like the first session of the Empowermente Circle. And I remember when you like first seeing it, I was very much like, I think this is something that I should do. Like, I should join this. And I think I had mentioned, because like you mentioned, we had met back in 2020. And so that was when I was posting a lot as well, like on my content, or like in my Instagram page. And then I suddenly just like stopped. And there was like a couple of reasons that I think I mentioned to you, like the things that just kind of come with the territory when you are a content creator, as well as just really trying to finish my like undergraduate degree and like trying to like really lock in. Um, so there was a lot that kind of came with that, and I remember I kept telling myself like I want to get back to posting content, and I would tell myself that a lot of the times. And so I think just seeing the Empowermental Circle and like having a community, a designated community for you to like hope keep you accountable, but also like talk about the journey. It was very much like this is very like this is what I need. It's in alignment of what I need. And so I think you had opened up the like next session for Empowermente, and I was like, okay, this time is going to be the time that I'm going to actually sign up. And like you mentioned, I had been doing already like a lot of volunteer work, with like doing outreach, and that's something that I'm really really passionate about. And so I have tried finding like different organizations even with my move, so like moving to Seattle, finding other organizations within like the company that I work for that actually does that outreach initiatives. Like it's something that I'm passionate about. But because of the museum and like my long-term relationship with them, which was, I feel like my life, I've had them part of my life more than I haven't at this point, because I met them, or I like initially started with them when I was 10 years old. And so I did like their middle school programs and high school programs. And then as like I just kept coming back basically to kind of help share my story and my journey. And so there's like there's just a lot of things that were kind of happening. Also like wanting to go back to social media. So you open Empowermente, and I was very much like, okay, this is like I have to sign up. And I think you extended it like a couple days, and it was like exactly what I needed because my schedule was just busy. And I was like, okay, she closed it. She closed the doors, but then you had like reopened it, and I was like, okay, this is exactly what I need. I'm gonna sign up. So there was just a lot that was kind of going on, and I think I just needed like direction. And I think something that we talked about at the beginning was also being multi-passionate, and how do I, as a multifaceted woman, kind of show up with my entire self, with like my engineering career, as well as like being passionate for outreach, as well as like being passionate about healing. Like how do I encompass all of that and really showcase that as my like personal brand? And yeah, I think that was essentially when I first came in. And the very big goal was like the goals that I had were to continue to, or to keep posting on social media and like become consistent with that, and then to actually formalize my relationship with the nonprofit. Because I had also done like I went to speak for like a board of trustees event that they had. And so it was like using again my story for like these trustees who are making these really large donations for the organization. And it was kind of like, okay, I feel like I'm sharing my voice, and they're like, my voice is being used for really for purposes that I align with. But like how do I, again, like you said, take that to the next level and really formalize that? um so yeah.
Yeah, no, thanks for taking us on that journey. Tell us about your win. Like, what happened after you recorded that documentary style video? And I also want to clarify that it was formalizing it in a way that was monetizing it for you, because you were spending a lot of, like, they were flying you out to go and
Yeah.
take time outside of your traditional career, right? Um, and also because you wanted to have a different level of partnership, right? Like you wanted to be part of the decision making that was happening. You didn't want to be like, okay, let's just bring her in and out, right? It was like, no, I want to be part of it. I've been part of it since I was 10, and I want to be part of the decision making. So tell us what happened after you joined, and what was that like?
Yeah, so I think a very big thing that I've been working through in the circle is really stepping into the identity of what it means to have that partnership. I think that was a huge block for me. And like in a lot of the expansion that I am intending to do in my life, I think the really big part that kind of I have to step into is the actual identity, because it's like you want something and you're trying to manifest it, but then are you doing the things that you need and like actually stepping into that identity? So I think a really big part of joining the circle was actually stepping into the identity. And I know we talked about like seeing it from a third person perspective. And then that was when we talked about like if we were to talk about, a woman who is from South Central LA and she works for this nonprofit, like how would you feel about that story? And that was really when I was able to see like third person, we're talking about me. And I think that was when I really just accepted the like my story and the power that it holds. And then as well as like some visualization and like meditation exercises that you could recommended. And so I think going through and like actually visualizing myself in that identity helped me unlock these opportunities. So I know we had like the documentary, and that was really big. And like you mentioned, I was using like sometime vacation times in order to be able to like make time for these opportunities, because again, like they're super important to me, and the actual like mission behind why we're actually doing the fundraising for these programs is super important. And the community that I come from, like I would essentially say this is like my roots and where I grew up in. And so that was really big for me to actually make time for. So if I had to use my vacation time or like PTO in order to actually make it out for these events, that's what I was doing. But it was getting to a point of like, okay, like I actually do need my own vacation time to like go and like explore and like have trips. And so how do I make this sustainable long term? And so that was when we talked about like, okay, how do you go ahead and ask for like that, like it's okay to ask for a budget. Like do you have a budget for this? And opening up that question. And I can't remember like what exactly the quote you said, but like if you basically don't, if you don't ask, like you'll never have that opportunity. And so what I did was, after that documentary, we recorded that, and that was a really big stepping stone, because like you said, it's a full circle moment for me to be someone who was like a kid, and like in these programs to now help create more funding and influence for these programs, as well as just the future of the actual nonprofit and like just the what they're building. And I think it's really influential and important for, again, the location of where it's for the community. And I think from there it was okay, let's I'm going to ask the next time like they ask me for, hey, can we fly you out to do a speaking opportunity? And so that was essentially what happened. They have a like specific program that's dedicated for aviation. And so they asked me like, "Hey, can you come talk to the like teens?" And so they're in high school and they're learning about aviation, and it's one of the like programs that they can go through. And so I was like, "Sure, I would love to." And I had accepted before, but then I realized like now is the opportunity to ask that question. And I know we kind of talked about like how exactly do I ask that question, and like how do I embrace the like courage that it is, because it's really uncomfortable. And even it being someone who I already have like a relationship with, like it was still very very uncomfortable to allow myself to feel like I'm allowed to ask for what I am, like my value, and I'm okay, like I'm allowed to just take up this space. And yeah, I think after that, like it was kind of a like, we're not sure, but let me like look into it. And so from there, that was actually when I actually got the contract. And that was like the very big win, was actually getting a contract in paper, and like basically saying I will like have like the expenses in order to actually fly me out, as well as like meals, so I had a per diem, and then getting a hotel room while I was staying out there, and then also like getting an actual speaking fee, and as well as like actually mentoring the students. So that was like that mentoring of the students for me was a really big win as well, because it was more so of like what we talked about, getting more involved. So it's not just like a one time thing of like I'm going to come talk to them this one time, but it's more so of like how do I get more involved and actually help these students and become and just have more of like an influence in the decisions that are being made around the museum. And so that was the really big one, is actually getting that contract, after having like this the many times that I've gone back and become a public speaker. And I feel like that really, um I guess, solidified, and like just seeing the title of like being a consultant, I think that allowed, again, really helped me step into that identity of like I'm a consultant, I am a public speaker, like this is something that I've been working up to, but this actually formalizes it. And I am like they are also identifying and like valuing the person and like what I bring to the table. And now I don't have to use just like, vacation time. I actually am getting that value as of like what I'm helping in my community.
I love that so much, Claudia. And I love that it was the shift in your identity and the way that you saw yourself first, and then it came into fruition.
Yeah.
And I love your specific situation because it was doing it with people that you trusted. A lot of people don't have that privilege. Sometimes we have to do it with people that are strangers and we're like, oh,
Yeah.
and that can be good as well because it's like, okay, we don't know them, but it's
Yeah.
in that trust to say like, hey, you see me, you see the value that I'm bringing. Can you help me as well? Right. And
Yeah.
I think so many of us separate having an impact from making money, right? Like
Yeah.
we see it as like, hey, if we're making money, that means it should be something completely different, adding value in a different way. But we don't see the skills that are our gifts as something that we should be getting paid for. And the way that I see it, unfortunately, is that sometimes we can fall into patterns of self-sacrifice, even with our own lives, as to like, I want to make an impact, but it's at the cost of my own life, at my own adventure, my own joy, right? And the way that I try to frame it is that the organization was partnering with you already. I mean,
Mhm.
they were using your success story to be able to fund maybe millions of dollars for their initiative. And it was more about becoming a, a trusted partner and a consultant and somebody on their team, basically. And
Right.
so I love that win for you. And we're all just so happy to see that, and that again you're able to build that as a full-time engineer. It's like, hey,
Yeah.
I'm an engineer, and also I am a public speaker and a consultant. So I love that so much. Thank you for sharing that. And I want to dive deeper into your story because we talked a lot about how you were sharing your story as part of like the museum and how it was such a big impact. Tell me about South LA. I
Yeah.
think California has its own culture, and for those of us that are not from there, we're like, what does that mean? And what were some of the challenges you faced? I think your story is a story of a trailblazer, of a first generation Latina who came from South LA. But tell us more about that and your journey into aerospace.
Yeah, I think I'll start off by saying that I'm so proud to say that I'm from like South Central Los Angeles. I think it took me a while to actually be able to embody and say that I was proud of that. And that kind of goes again with the struggle that it takes in being in like the like engineering world and just being a first generation. And I say that because when like as I was like kind of getting into like these spaces, when I would be asked like where are you from, I would say like, oh, I'm from Gardena or I'm from Torrance. And the reason I say that is because those like areas or communities are not really known to be like, let's say, from the hood. Whereas like when I'm say I'm from South Central LA, that is just like directly the thought that kind of comes with it. And so I was kind of afraid of like what is the like what biases are going to come from like me very like proudly saying I'm from South Central LA. Like what are they going to think, like, oh yeah, this person, like they don't really have the same education as like other people. Like all these assumptions, stereotypes and biases that kind of come from the community. And I was afraid of that kind of like starting out. Whereas like now I'm very much, I very proudly and like represent where I'm from in my community. So coming from South Central LA, definitely difficult. And like, as you mentioned, like a first generation Latina, I feel like I can really speak on this like in depth. But um, like my family, both immigrants. My mom is from Guatemala and my dad is from El Salvador. And they both met here in the United States. And my mom actually got pregnant when she was pretty young. So she was 17 when she had my older brother. And that meant that she didn't finish high school and she had to work a job and like sometimes two jobs in order for them to be able to like afford to put like food on the table and like have housing for us. And my dad also worked as a smoke check technician, still is a smoke check technician. And then he was working that as well. And like also he took on roles as like working in a car wash, things like that. Just really hard working parents. But what that meant a lot of the times is like the actual like how do we get to school, things like that. Like those logistics were difficult growing up. And so I think that ultimately led into a lot of independence for me. So just like going into the area, which is like not really the safest. Like I think again, like kind of mentioning like you're growing up in the hood, it's not really the safest. I did rely on like a lot of friends to kind of help me sometimes after school. Like let's like I'll go hang out with some friends and like I think their friends and their parents really opened the doors for me. Like they would help me with like serving me a plate of food after like school because like my parents were at work. So there's a lot that kind of just came from growing up in that community, as well as just like the gang violence that kind of is present as well. Like that was a really big thing. And so I remember like there was times in like elementary school and middle school that I was like I guess my mom was told like, okay, we should probably place her in like honors classes, or we should probably place her in like magnet classes. But I was very severely bullied when I was in elementary school. So when I got to like middle school, that was really difficult for me. Like I didn't want to stand out. I didn't want to like take up space in that way. Like I didn't want to call attention to me and like, oh, I'm a smart person, because then that would just get me bullied. So I think I took a very different approach as just like survival when it came to middle school. And so that kind of is where this like nonprofit organization kind of stepped in and like actually like did the hands-on like projects with me and like getting me interested in STEM. And that was a shift for me in terms of like where my attention was going to. And so yeah, just really getting interested in like science and doing like the application and like really building that curiosity for the like the world around me was a really big thing. And then I talk about this a lot, but the actual like receiving of the Space Shuttle Endeavour at the California Science Center, like that was a really big thing for me. And the reason was because I was an intern at that time. And so it felt like it was being received in like the backyard of like where I was working basically. And so that was a really big turning point. And as someone who is coming from the community that I come from, like I didn't really know much about engineering. I didn't know about what like the actual careers in STEM look like. And so I just remember seeing the shuttle and seeing the like the NASA meatball on the shuttle, and that was like to me instantly I made that connection and I said I want to be an engineer for NASA, or I want to work for NASA in some kind of capacity. I'm not too sure like what that looks like, but that's what I want to do. And that's really the starting point for me. And then from there, I just kept saying like to people that I went to high school with, like, I want to work for NASA one day. And I think for people who like come from communities like us, it's kind of a like how, like we don't know how, like how that's going to actually happen and how that's going to come into fruition. So I kind of felt like I was saying something that felt out of reach. Like it was like this crazy dream that I would like it would take me years to achieve is kind of how it felt in that moment. And then I like there's yeah, it kind of goes into like me actually getting like my admission to undergrad after high school. Like I had gotten that basically revoked, and that was because I had received like an a D in my AP government class. Um, that it's kind of like a story in itself, but essentially what ended up happening is I went to community college and I went to Pasadena City College.
Um,
And from there, I signed up to a program that's made specifically for community college students, on behalf of NASA, which is NASA's Community College Aerospace Scholars. And then I joined that. That really was like what opened the doors to NASA for me. I met some of my mentors that I'm still connected to, like up until this day. And I went back to my community college, enrolled in some engineering courses after that. And then from there, like I think a year later, so I did like NCAS in 2016. In 2017, I got my offer for my internship at JPL. And then I was there for like basically 5 years or so. And it was part of like my journey and transition from like going from community college to then transferring to like a 4 year university. And yeah, graduated from like 4 year university. I think the summer before actually graduating, I interned at SpaceX. And then like after graduating, that was kind of more so like again my curiosity that kind of led me to flight test, which is what I currently do now, and that's like in Seattle. And so that's kind of like the story in terms of like coming like where I grew up from, like coming and having like immigrant parents, growing up in the community, and then really getting that redirection into STEM, and then all throughout like how I got into engineering after like community college, and then up until like graduating and now moving in Seattle.
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing that. Maybe I should have broken down the question, but I wanted to like understand, what was that? What were those challenges? Because
Mhm.
sometimes, like the term first gen, I think groups us into very similar experiences, but our individual experience is so unique. Um,
Yeah.
really appreciate you walking us through that. And what I was going to say from the beginning was that when you were saying, now I feel very proud to say I'm from South Central LA, is
Yeah.
that sometimes, in these fields that are very, sometimes can be alpha, sometimes can be very masculine, sometimes they can
Yeah.
be extremely competitive. They ask you things like, where are you from and what school did you go
Yeah.
to be biased and to get an idea of like what kind of education you have or whatever it may be. They do that with that intent, right? So
Mhm.
sometimes it is valid to feel like, well, like what should I really be saying, and it's
Yeah.
normal to feel a little bit held back because I mean, if South Central LA is like the hood, maybe they would be biased to you and think that you didn't do well and you're not doing well. I don't know. We don't know each individual's person's motivations, obviously, but just to validate a little bit about that experience, because even for me, like when I would say, I went to UTEP, it's not a worldwide known school, and I feel like it was weird to just kind of see people brush me off because of it, and
Yeah.
so I can totally understand that, but I think your story is a story of so much power and resilience and transformation, because a lot of people maybe don't understand that being first generation means operating in a specific software that you got taught by your parents, and then you're operating in a different hardware and world
Yeah.
that doesn't quite fit what you're thinking and how you got raised. So I can't imagine, just all the mental and inner work that it took. And you are such an example of trailblazing and of such an inspirational story, not only for people who are young engineers and looking to build their careers, but also entrepreneurs. Claudia, I hope that you understand that, like, there's people who are dreaming of doing things beyond their 9 to 5 job, and
Yeah.
you have hit a point where you're like, I'm getting paid to speak. I have a
Yeah.
business. I am a consultant, and so yeah, I hope that you know that it's not just about your career. It's also about like you as a person and everything that you encompass. So I just wanted to share that and appreciate you in all your greatness. And right now that you're in a point of your life where, hey, I did all this big dream that I had from when I was little, like I wanted to experience NASA, I wanted to experience aerospace. And now that you are working in aerospace and you're settled in your role for a few years now, tell me about who Claudia is now. So we talked a little bit about being multi-passionate. You have mentioned, that you're in an interracial relationship, and also that you like content creation and travel and all of these things. So what has been something that has helped you stay aligned with your purpose and identity? Because you have such a strong gold star. It is very clear that maybe at times you feel a little bit lost, but it's a
Yeah.
really big north star. So how have you stayed aligned throughout, not just your upbringing, but now in your new time as Claudia?
Yeah, I think you kind of mentioned it in terms of the struggles that it really took. And I think I can really sit here for a really long time and like get into all the nitty-gritty of like along the way how difficult it was to just take up space and like I guess like even like you mentioned like the male dominated fields and how I once like I wasn't comfortable with like putting on makeup, things like that, like embracing my femininity. Like there's a lot of things that I've kind of gone through without my journey and like those struggles. And I think for me what that North Star is ensuring that the other women that come behind me don't have to feel that struggle, or they feel seen in that struggle, that they don't feel alone. Because yeah, I think that kind of led to a lot of my mental health and like in terms of like burnout and really dealing and with like anxiety, or at some point like having panic attacks. Like that really manifested in the way that I wasn't taking care of my mental health. And so that was actually something that made me super passionate about that. And so for me, it was my passion and really my purpose is to help others feel seen. And I think that is what I continue to do as like even part of like now. And that can lead in like what you mentioned, like interracial relationships, and how like there is a different norms and different upbringings, and really understanding those different perspectives and like what the importance of like communication is. And so I think a huge part of me is like I love learning about emotional intelligence, because I think emotional intelligence really helps us connect with one another and like make sure that other people feel seen, and also understand our own like traumas, and like you mentioned like our own programming and like everything that we went through and how that makes us who we are. And then trying to hold space or holding space for other people who come from like a different programming, and how do you actually like gain that connection. So for me it really it's what it has my journey like taught me, and how can I share those like lessons, or the just like life lessons and things that I've gone through with other people, so that maybe it helps with like what they're going through in that moment in time, and they don't feel like isolated in that situation of like it's just me, I'm the one that's going through the situation by myself. But rather someone who else has gone through like a similar journey can like share and impart maybe some like wisdom of things that they've have learned through like like the falling and like getting back up and just really going through like the trenches sometimes. So yeah, I think a lot of it really comes down to how do I make sure that someone doesn't feel alone in their battles.
That's so beautiful. And I think it encompasses all the different layers of your journey of not just, being in a male dominated field, but also healing generational trauma and being, a first gen trailblazer. And what was I going to ask? Hold on. Iba a preguntarte. Ay, I went back. Purpose, identity. Oh, what I'm hearing from what you said is that through your journey, you've developed a deep sense of empathy and service for people. Because
Yep.
I think even being Latina, we come from collective countries, and it is part of our nature to want to um, be living those collective values of let us all go together, let us not
Yeah.
leave a person behind. And I love that you've transformed it and alchemized it in your own way of like, let's make everybody feel seen here, and let's also think about mental health, that's so important and not talked about in industries that are so heavy sometimes and so intense. Of course they have like their wonders and amazing things about them, but they do think, I feel, sometimes miss that element of mental health and softness. So I love that
Yeah.
you're able to bring that to your new era now. I love that. So we are almost coming to an end. The last topic that I want to talk to you about is that we mentioned about mental health and healing and therapy. What does that look like now compared to, like several years ago? Where are you in your journey with healing? How do you see it now?
Yeah, I feel like that's a very powerful question. So for me, it was more so at the beginning identifying that there were like some traumas, some wounds that I really needed like to work through. And I guess just identifying that, and really by, and you mentioned this the other day in terms of how those are identified when you are trying to hold relationships and like really close relationships with people, and that can be romantic but also like platonic, like your friendships and family and familial relationships. So for me it was more so of like kind of feeling like I kept hitting a block, and I was trying to identify why was I hitting those roadblocks in my relationships. And that really is what helped me identify like, okay, going to therapy and the importance of it, and working through those things that are really embedded sometimes in our subconscious. And so really bringing that to the surface, it was like a lot that was brought to the surface at once. Like once you, I feel like, open that can of worms, it just kind of like comes
It just keeps going
out.
and going.
And so that was what really happened for me like back in like 2020. And so now like 5 years into it, I think really just understanding the tools that are like not really taught to our community, in terms of like emotional regulation, or like yeah, just like identifying your emotions and allowing yourself to like process those emotions, which goes into like emotional regulation. So a really big thing is just like having the tools to like self-soothe and identify like the self-love things, a lot of things again that are not really taught within our community. I'm now like developing in my mental health journey. And so that really takes me in through like the high stress and high pressure environments that I do have like for work, and also having like the different things that I want to accomplish. So getting back to like grounding myself and really reconnecting with myself, and that kind of is just sitting in silence sometimes. And so, yeah, really connecting with my values and things of that sort, and journaling. Again, I think it really comes back down to like, what are my tools and the toolkit that I've built in my mental health journey, and how can I now lean on those when I'm having a moment where I can identify, and again, growing like based on the relationship that I've built on myself, I can identify when something's wrong, when something's off, when I can feel my energy is off, my energy is lower than others, or my thoughts, I can catch myself in a negative like thought pattern, and my anxiety is really like taking over. When I catch myself in that, I really just sit and allow it to happen, and like give it some space, and then really redirect with the tools that I've built, which whether that be like meditation, journaling, talking it with like a friend, things that I've learned in therapy. So I think in terms of like where I was before, I think I just really didn't have those tools identified to me, because it's not something that's really taught to you. And so once I had like really that awareness, then identifying those patterns or things that I needed to work through, then now building that and using those on like a day-to-day basis, and having and holding that relationship with myself of understanding like when I need to either slow down or yeah, just allow myself to think through maybe where I'm at.
Yeah, it's developing a deep sense of partnership again, but with yourself, right?
Yeah.
Of love, of nurturing, of care with yourself, of always being aware of like situations and what you liked, what you didn't like, what you want to continue doing. And I think that's what life is about, like to keep rediscovering ourselves through every lens and angle and situation that we come across. So I think that's really, really beautiful and so needed for everyone, in my opinion. You know, I always talk about it.
Yeah.
So I love all of that, and to be able to use it in your everyday life is amazing. So thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that. So we are getting to the end of our podcast recording. I want to thank you again for being here. Again, your story is incredibly inspiring. You are such a driven, loving, caring, compassionate person. I'm trying to think of words. I'm like, I don't even like just yeah, so incredibly resilient, smart, all these things. So I hope
Thank
that
you.
proud of yourself, and I hope that you're enjoying this stage, which is so sweet. You know, you're getting to enjoy all the fruits of your labor and being able to continue on your mission and just be able to keep expanding. You know, we say take up space, and the great and beautiful thing about taking up space is that you can just keep taking up space, you know,
Yeah.
wherever it takes you. So is there any other message that you would like to share with other women, first generation Latinas who are in STEM or out of STEM, about, you know, taking up space, or anything that you would like to share?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've learned the most in this like season of my life is really the beauty of continuing to dream, and like how there will be spaces, although like there are moments where we are kind of in the thick of it and in those trenches, and we feel very isolated and feel like very alone, and like in those moments that we kind of can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. And I know that I've kind of been in that situation multiple times of like, how am I going to get out of this situation? And like that's all that I could think about is survival. I think that there is a beauty to life in terms of like continuing to dream, because that's kind of like what you mentioned, your north star out of those situations is really connecting with yourself and your dreams. And if you could make anything possible in this lifetime, like what would that be? And like really connecting to that. And I think there's so much beauty behind that, and like being a person who dreams and then makes their dreams possible. And I think that's completely possible for everyone. And it really just takes into tapping into that identity and what does it mean to step into that identity, kind of like what we talked about. And so i I continue to just dream every single day of like what would it be, like what we talked about, to be that public speaker, what would it be to be that engineer, what would it be to be that person who goes to space one day, what would it be to like inspire the youth and like share my voice more openly. And I think that is what really takes me to like expanding that for future generations. And yeah, I think the beauty, there's so much beauty in dreaming, and I really would encourage everyone to like tap into those dreams and really make that possible for themselves, because I think chasing after those dreams and what your heart desires is one of the greatest acts of self-love that you could ever like hold for yourself. So yeah, I think that would be my closing message.
Yay! Thank you so much. I love that. So you heard, Claudia, you have to keep dreaming. To keep dreaming, no matter what stage of life you're in. It's never too early, it's never too late, it's the perfect time. So thank you so much, Claudia, for your
Of
time and
course.
sharing part of your story with us. We appreciate you so much, and we hope to have you back soon. Thank you.
Thank you.